So now we need to add Firebase to the application. So firstly, you should be knowing what Firebase is. It's a backend as a service, or to say it provides a fully managed backend infrastructure. So it provides a bunch of different services, different things which you may need in your application, whether it be a database, or you may need to add authentication, you may need to host your web application, or you may even need to add the feature of uploading media files. It provides that, and a bunch of different things, as you can see. So for this application, we just need three things, I believe. We need the authentication, we need the Firestore, which is a NoSQL database, and the hosting, which comes at the end in order to host the web application. So that being said, now you need to navigate, you need to open the firebase.google.com, and you also need to have a Gmail account, which is kind of prerequisite in order to use Firebase. After you do that, you need to log in, and then you will find the button of go to console over here. So getting over there, we need to create a project, as this is a fresh account. I will be creating a project over here, and you can name it whatever you want. For this one, I will be naming it as shortly accept terms. Nope, I don't want to share anything. Create project. It will take a couple of seconds, I think, maybe, doesn't matter. Now at the same time, while it's like creating the project, we also need to install the Firebase package in the application, which goes by the name of Firebase. So we need to install this package, as we will be using it in order to communicate with our project. So let's install this package in the application. Over here, I will be creating another terminal, and the name of the package is Firebase itself. So let's do that. Yarn add Firebase, or yarn, npm install Firebase. So it's going to take a few minutes. Let me see. Okay, it's done. The project is done. Let's just continue. So you will be presented something like this. This is the main page, and over here, the very first thing that we need to do is we need to get the credentials in order to communicate with this project, so that our application can use the services which are provided by the Firebase for this project. So for that, as we are building a web application, let's just click on this button, the web, and it's going to ask to register the application. We will do this. Well, we actually need to do it. Let's name it as shortly. We will be adding the hosting later. Let's just register the application, and let's see if it's installed. Perfect. Kill the terminal. Getting back over here. So now we have the Firebase config, which includes all the different fields, all these things which are required in order to communicate with this project. So I'm going to copy the entire object over here, and let me just get back to the console. And now heading back to the project, as we have installed the Firebase package right over here, let's just create a file for it. So within the source directory, I'm going to create a new file which goes by the name of Firebase. So inside of here, we first need to import app from the Firebase package /app. And now we need to initialize an application. So we have this Firebase config, and in order to initialize an application, we need to pass in this Firebase config to the function. So within the app, we have the initialize. Well, one second, I made a typo. It's Firebase. So within this, we have a function which goes by the name of initialize app, and we have to pass in the Firebase config object this entire thing, which will connect this application to the project. So it's going to return back the Firebase, and we can hold it as such. And we also need to import the Firestore. So for that, over here we can import. For this thing, we do not need to import it as a named import. We can just import it by adding it in such a way. So the thing is that within this package, the Firebase, we have all the different services. Like for instance, if I add slash, you will find that it provides all these different services, which includes a lot of different things, which in this case we do not require. We just require the Firestore and the authentication in such a way, the auth. So in this way, we can just exclude all the other things and import only the ones which we do require. So that being said, we can just export default. In this case, we want to export Firebase, this thing, and we also need to initialize these two. So for that, right over here, we can add in Firestore, the database. We have the Firebase. So let's Firebase dot Firestore. We need to call this function, which will give us the Firestore instance, using which we can communicate with the Firestore database. Let's do the same thing for the auth. Over here, do the same thing, and now we can just export all these three things. If we do that, let's head back to in this case, we will be working on the home page for now. So within the home component, so for the time being, what we can do is, like, initially the idea is that over here, when the user clicks on this button, it's going to open a modal box, which I have not really planned just yet. So it's going to open a modal box, which, one second, has when it's going to be displayed, it's going to make the background as, it's going to add an overlay, something like this, and this would be the modal, some border, and we will be having the title, which says, never mind, the title is going to be login, sign up, something like this. We're going to have a cross over here, and over here we need to display the respective input fields. So the thing is, we will be working on the modal at a later point. Like once we finish off the entire functionality, then we will be working on the home page. But for the time being, we do require the input fields for the user, for us to log in order to check the services. So for that, inside the home component, we will be importing the text field, which is an input component. And over here, we can wrap the entire thing inside of fragments. And next to it, we need to add in the text field. We can add the label of email for the first one. Then for the second one, it has to be password. And then we also need to have a button for the user to sign in, to click on it and then initiate the request. So we can name it as sign up for the time being. So now if we take a look, well, one second, we need typography and the button. So now if we take a look, there we have these two input elements and the button. So that's perfect. Not perfect, but yeah, it will do the job. So now we need to have a state so that we can kind of hold the value. And for that, let's import the use state hook from React. So over here, instead of creating state for individual input element, I prefer creating an object as a state, and within that object we can place in all those respective fields. So I will be naming the state as form and the function to be set form. So using the use state, let's just pass in an object, and over here we need to add two properties, one for each input field. So for the first one, it's going to be email, and by default, we can set it to be an empty string. Then we need to add in the password, which will again be an empty string as such. And I think that's it. Let's bind these two values with their respective input field. So for the first text field, let's pass in the value, which will point to the respective property, which is form.email. And we also need to provide a name, just so that while making any change on this input field, we can extract it and we can update the state. So the name has to be the same thing as what we have over here. So it will be email as such, and then the on change. So we will be creating this function in a second. Let's just add it over here. We need to pass in the same three props on the second text field, where we need to change the value and the name to be password in this case. That's perfect. So now let's create the function. So this handle change will be called whenever something changes on the input field, and is going to be called with the default event object. Out of this object, we can extract the new value for the input field plus the name of the input field where the change occurred. And we have to use those two things in order to update the state. So using the set form, we will be passing in a function to this function because we need to retain the previous state. We do not want to wipe away what we had earlier. So as we know that whatever value that we provide over here is going to be the new state. So the new state has to be merged in with the previous one. So over here we will be passing in a function where the first argument will be the old form, and we're going to return back a new object, spreading out the old form just so that we can retain the previous values, using the name out of the event object as event. By the way, we have to wrap it inside of square brackets as it's an object, and this is this would be a dynamic property. So event.target.name, which will point to this thing that we have over here, and the value of it will be event, not like this, it's an object, event.target.value from the same event object. So for the time being, let's just log the state to the console by adding in the on click on the button, which will be an anonymous inline function, and we just log the form to the console. If we do that, let's just see. Firstly, we should be able to make changes. That's working perfect. And then the password. So that is perfect. We are able to, like, we have successfully binded the state. The state is bound with these two input elements. So that's great. Now we just need to call the function from the Firebase package, which allows us to sign up a user. And for that, over here within the home component, we need to import the authentication that we are exporting from this file, the auth. Let's do that. Let's import the auth from the file, and over here we can create a function which goes by the name of handle signup. We first need to create the signup, and it won't be called with any argument because we have the values right over here. And from the auth, we have a function which goes by the name of create username with email and password. So we have to pass in the email and the password over here. So over here we have the form.email and form.password. One more thing for the password, let's just pass in the type and set it to be password, just so that we can add in the obscure effect on the password field. Well, that didn't work. See, okay, now it's working. Alright, so we are calling this function, and it's going to be an asynchronous function. So let's add in the async keyword to this function, just so that we can await the request. Well, I think that's it for the sign up. And in order to actually see 1 second. In order to actually see whether or not it's working, we can log the current user. So for that, on the home page right over here, I will be adding in the console.log. Inside the auth, we have the current user. Let's just log that right over here. And now we just need to call this function when the user clicks on this button right over here. And there's one more thing that we have to do. So within the project inside the Firebase, over here on the authentication tab, this thing, we first need to enable the authentication for the email and password, as that's what we are using for this application. So over here, sign in method, we have all the different providers, all the different ways in which we can enable the authentication. So the first one, email and password, we just need to enable it, just this one, and click on save. Once it's done, we can test it out. So now let's just add in the email, test@gmail. So as you can see, one more thing, that currently, as we are not logged in, this thing is resulting, it's returning null because the user is not logged in. So now let's just try signing up. So once we sign up, it's automatically going to sign in, which means that there should be a current user to this value. So now I will be setting the password something like this, and let's see if it works. So we won't be seeing anything visually, like we won't be able to see anything, but now let's see. As you can see, I had to make some change in order for the component to re-render, but the current user is now filled in, it's not null, which means that we have successfully signed up the user and the user is currently signed in. And at the same time, if we head back to the Firebase project, within the users, we should be seeing the email right over here. So that is perfect. We have actually implemented the entire authentication for this application. So that's perfect. Now we need to work on the other stuff. So let's do that.